The sun was just starting to peek over the mountains when Esperanza opened her eyes. For a moment everything felt normal. Then she smelled the smoke. Her small adobe house near the Gila River looked like a tornado had hit it. Broken pottery was scattered everywhere. The wooden table her husband Carlos had made was split in half. Their few precious belongings were either missing or destroyed. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the still figure lying in the dirt outside. Carlos had been trying to protect their animals when the Apache warriors came before dawn. He'd grabbed his old rifle and run outside in his nightclothes. That was the last time Esperanza saw him alive. Now she knelt beside him in the morning light, her hands shaking as she touched his face. 12-year-old Miguel stood behind her, his eyes wide with shock. The boy had hidden in the root cellar like his father told him, listening to the sounds of the raid above. Horses neighing, men shouting, shots being fired. Then silence. "Mama," Miguel whispered. "What do we do now?" Esperanza didn't answer right away. She couldn't. Her throat felt like it was full of sand. Carlos had been everything to her. Her husband, her best friend, her partner in building this small farm from nothing. They'd come to this valley 5 years ago with dreams of raising cattle and growing corn. Now those dreams lay as broken as the pottery around their feet. The Apache had taken everything they could carry. All 6 of their cattle were gone. Their horse, their mule, even their chickens had vanished. The raiders had left only what they couldn't use: broken furniture, torn clothes, and empty grain sacks. Esperanza forced herself to stand up. She had to be strong for Miguel. The boy was looking at her like she had all the answers, but the truth was she felt completely lost. How was a widow with a young son supposed to survive out here alone? Their nearest neighbors lived 20 miles away. The closest town was even farther. Carlos had chosen this remote spot because the land was cheap and the water was good. Now that isolation felt like a death sentence. "We need to bury Papa," she said quietly. The words hurt to say, but it had to be done. They couldn't leave Carlos lying in the sun. Miguel nodded and went to get their only remaining shovel. The Apache had taken the good tools, but they'd left this old, rusty one behind. Maybe they figured it wasn't worth carrying. Digging the grave took most of the morning. The ground was hard and they had to stop often to rest. Miguel tried to be brave, but Esperanza could see tears running down his dirty face. She wanted to cry too, but she couldn't let herself break down. Not yet. As they worked, she kept looking around nervously. Were the Apache still nearby? Would they come back? Carlos had always said you never knew when they might strike. He'd been right about that. When the hole was finally deep enough, they wrapped Carlos in their best blanket and lowered him down. Esperanza said a prayer, asking God to take care of her husband's soul. Miguel threw in a handful of dirt and they began to fill the grave. That's when Esperanza noticed something that made her blood run cold. There were tracks in the soft dirt near their well. Fresh tracks. Someone had been here recently, watching them work. She grabbed Miguel's arm. "Get in the house," she whispered. "Right now." "But Mama, do what I say." They hurried inside, and Esperanza barred the door. She found Carlos's rifle and checked if it was loaded. 2 bullets left. Not much, but better than nothing. Through the small window, she scanned the hills around their property. The morning was getting hot, and heat waves made everything shimmer. Was that a person moving behind those rocks, or just her imagination? Miguel huddled close to her. "Are they coming back?" "I don't know, mijo. I don't know." They stayed inside for hours, listening to every sound. A bird calling, the wind rustling through the mesquite bushes, their own hearts beating fast. But no war cries, no sound of horses, just the desert being quiet. By afternoon, Esperanza's fear had turned into something else: anger. How dare they do this to her family? Carlos had never hurt anyone. He'd been a good man who just wanted to work his land in peace. He'd helped their neighbors when they needed it. He'd shared water with travelers passing through. And this was how the world repaid his kindness. But anger wouldn't bring him back. Anger wouldn't fill their empty pantry or replace their stolen animals. She had to think practically now. What could she and Miguel do to survive? They had the well, which was worth its weight in gold out here. They had the land, though working it without animals would be nearly impossible. They had the house, which needed repairs after the raid, and they had each other. Maybe they could make it to the nearest town and ask for help. But that meant leaving everything behind and walking for days through dangerous country. What if they ran into the same Apache band that killed Carlos? What if other raiders found their empty homestead and claimed it? As the sun started to set, Esperanza made a hard decision. They would stay. This was their home, bought with Carlos's sweat and blood. She wouldn't let anyone drive them away from it. She told Miguel to help her clean up the house. They worked by candlelight, sweeping up broken glass and trying to put their lives back together piece by piece. It felt impossible, like trying to hold water in her hands. That night, they pushed the heavy wooden chest against the door and took turns staying awake. Every sound outside made them jump. An owl hooting, a coyote howling in the distance, the old house creaking as it cooled down. But the Apache didn't come back that night, or the next night, or the one after that. 3 days passed. 3 long, scary days of wondering if they would survive another week. They had a little food left, but not much. Some dried beans, a bit of cornmeal, water from the well. Carlos had taught Miguel to set rabbit snares, but so far they'd caught nothing. On the 4th morning, as Esperanza was trying to figure out how to repair their broken fence, she saw something that made her heart stop. A lone rider was coming down from the hills, heading straight for their homestead. She called for Miguel and grabbed the rifle. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. But as the rider got closer, she realized something strange. This wasn't a raid. It was just one man, moving slowly, his hands visible. And she recognized him. It was the same Apache warrior who had led the attack that killed her husband. The same man who had destroyed her life was riding calmly toward her house like he was coming for a social visit. Esperanza's hands shook as she pointed the rifle at him. What could he possibly want now? Hadn't he taken enough already? The warrior stopped his horse about 50 feet away and raised one hand in what might have been a greeting. Then he did something completely unexpected. He started to speak. Esperanza's finger was on the trigger, but something made her hesitate. The Apache warrior wasn't charging at them with weapons drawn. He wasn't shouting war cries or threatening them. He was just sitting on his horse, speaking in a low, calm voice. The problem was she couldn't understand what he was saying. He was speaking Apache, and she only knew Spanish and a little English. But his tone didn't sound angry or threatening. If anything, he sounded almost respectful. Miguel peered out from behind her, his eyes wide with terror. "Mama, is that the one who killed Papa?" Esperanza nodded, never taking her eyes off the warrior. Yes, this was definitely the same man. She'd gotten a good look at him during the raid. He was tall and lean, with long black hair and a scar running down his left cheek. He wore traditional Apache clothing, buckskin pants and shirt, moccasins, and a red headband. His horse was a beautiful pinto that looked well cared for. The warrior seemed to realize she didn't understand him. He switched to broken Spanish, speaking slowly and carefully. "Señora," he said, "I come to talk." "No fight, talk?" Esperanza's voice came out as a croak. "You want to talk?" "You killed my husband!" The warrior nodded sadly. "See, I kill your man. I know this brings you pain." His Spanish was rough, but she could understand him well enough. What she couldn't understand was why he was here. What could an Apache warrior possibly want to discuss with the widow of a man he'd murdered? "You took everything," she said, her voice getting stronger with anger. "Our animals, our food, our tools. What more do you want?" "I want nothing more from you," the warrior said. "I come to explain. And maybe to help." "Help?" Esperanza almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to help me? After what you did?" The warrior slowly dismounted from his horse, keeping his hands visible. Esperanza raised the rifle higher, but he made no aggressive moves. Instead, he sat down on the ground about 30 feet away, crossing his legs. It was a position that made it clear he wasn't planning to attack. "My name is Nalnish," he said. "It means he works hard in my language. I tell you this so you know I am not just some nameless enemy." Esperanza didn't lower the rifle, but she found herself listening despite her fear and anger. Why did you come back? She asked. Why risk it? Your people could be anywhere by now. Nalnish looked toward the mountains, then back at her. I come back because I have children too, and they are hungry. That's not my problem, Esperanza shot back. You made your choice when you raided us. Yes, Nalnish agreed. I make choice. Hard choice. But maybe there is better way. He gestured toward Miguel, who was still hiding behind his mother. Your boy. How old? 12. Esperanza answered without thinking, then immediately regretted giving him any information. Nalnish nodded thoughtfully. 12. Good age for learning. In my tribe, boys this age begin training to be warriors. Learn to hunt, to fight, to survive. What does that have to do with anything? Your husband is dead, Nalnish said bluntly. Soon other Apache bands will learn this place has no man to protect it. They will come. Or maybe Mexican bandits, or American soldiers looking for trouble. You cannot fight them all with one old rifle. Esperanza's heart sank because she knew he was right. She'd been trying not to think about it, but their isolation made them sitting ducks for anyone who wanted to cause trouble. Your boy needs to learn to be strong, Nalnish continued, to survive in this hard country. I can teach him. Teach him? Esperanza stared at him in disbelief. You want to teach my son the same hands that killed his father? Yes, Nalnish said simply. Same hands. But these hands also know how to find water in desert, how to track animals, how to fight and live when others die. Your boy needs these skills. And what do you get out of it? Esperanza asked suspiciously. Why would you help us? Nalnish was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. When he looked up, there was something in his eyes that surprised her. Sadness, maybe, or regret. My family is starving, he said finally. Reservation has no food. Government promises much, gives little. My children, they cry from hunger every night. He pointed toward their well. You have good water here. Sweet water. During dry season, this is worth more than gold. If I teach your boy, maybe sometimes my family can come here for water, when we need it most. Esperanza felt like the world had turned upside down. This Apache warrior, this man who had destroyed her life, was asking for her help, and in return he was offering to train Miguel in skills that might keep them both alive. You're asking me to trust you, she said, to trust the man who made me a widow. Yes, Nalnish said. I ask for trust. I know this is a very hard thing. It's not just hard, Esperanza said, her voice rising. It's impossible. How can I trust you? How can I let you near my son? Nalnish stood up slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening. Because you are a smart woman. You know truth. This land will kill you both if you do not learn to live with it. Your husband, he was good man, but he did not know Apache ways, did not know how to see danger coming, did not know how to hide, how to fight, how to survive. Esperanza hated to admit it, but he was right again. Carlos had been brave and hard-working, but he'd been caught completely off guard by the raid. He'd run outside with his rifle like he was chasing off cattle thieves, not realizing he was facing experienced warriors. I could kill you right now, she said, raising the rifle again. You're alone and I have a gun. Yes, you could try, Nalnish agreed. But you have 2 bullets. Maybe you hit me, maybe you miss. And if you miss, what then? I am faster than you, stronger, more experienced in fighting. He wasn't bragging or threatening. He was just stating facts, and they both knew it. But I do not want to fight you, he continued. I want to make, how you say, agreement, deal. I teach your boy to survive. You let my family drink from your well when we need water. Both our children live, and if I say no, Nalnish shrugged. Then I ride away. You never see me again, but other Apache will come, and they will not offer to teach your boy. They will just take what they want. Miguel tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mama, he whispered. What's he saying? Esperanza looked down at her son. Miguel was trying to be brave, but she could see the fear in his eyes. He was just a boy. How was he supposed to protect them both when grown men with guns and experience came calling? She looked back at Nalnish, who was waiting patiently for her answer. This was probably the strangest conversation she'd ever had in her life. A few days ago, this man had been her worst enemy. Now he was offering to help save her son's life. I need time to think, she said finally. Nalnish nodded. Wise, think carefully, but do not think too long. Dry season comes soon, and with it much danger. He walked back to his horse and mounted up. I will return in 3 days. At sunrise. If you want to make deal, you and boy will be waiting by well. If not, he shrugged. Then we both take our chances. He turned his horse and started riding back toward the hills. Then he stopped and called back to her. Senora, your husband fought bravely. He died with honor. I want you to know this. With that, he rode away, leaving Esperanza standing in front of her house with more questions than answers. Her heart was pounding, and her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the rifle down. Miguel looked up at her with confusion and fear. Mama, what just happened? I don't know, mijo, she whispered. I honestly don't know. For 3 days, Esperanza barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nalnish's face. Sometimes he was the terrifying warrior who had killed Carlos. Other times he was the sad father talking about his hungry children. Her mind couldn't make sense of it all. Miguel wasn't sleeping well either. He kept asking questions she couldn't answer. Why did the Apache man come back? What did he really want? Could they trust him? Should they trust him? I don't know, Esperanza found herself saying over and over. I just don't know. On the second night, as they sat by candlelight eating their meager dinner of beans and cornmeal, Miguel asked the question that had been bothering her most. Mama, do you think Papa would want us to make this deal? Esperanza set down her spoon and stared at the flickering candle. What would Carlos have said? He'd been a practical man, someone who made decisions based on what would keep his family safe and fed. But he'd also been proud. Would he have wanted his son trained by the very people who had killed him? Your papa wanted you to grow up strong and smart, she said finally. He wanted you to be able to take care of yourself and your family someday. But he also said never to trust Apache, Miguel pointed out. He said they were dangerous. He was right about that, Esperanza agreed. They are dangerous. But maybe that's exactly why you need to learn from them. The more she thought about it, the more she realized Nalnish was right about their situation. They were sitting ducks out here. Carlos had chosen this remote location because he wanted to build something away from the troubles of towns and cities. But without him, that isolation was a death sentence. She'd been going over their options again and again. They could try to make it to the nearest town, but that meant abandoning everything Carlos had worked for. They could hope some other family would take them in, but that would make them charity cases for the rest of their lives. Or they could try to stay and defend the homestead themselves, which would probably get them both killed. None of those choices felt right. But Nalnish's offer, that was something else entirely. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also the only option that might actually work. On the third morning, Esperanza woke up before dawn. She'd made her decision sometime during the night, though she couldn't say exactly when. Maybe it was when she realized she was down to their last handful of cornmeal. Maybe it was when she heard coyotes howling and wondered how long before they got desperate enough to come looking for easy prey. Miguel, she said, shaking her son awake. Get dressed. We're going to meet him. Miguel's eyes went wide. Really, you decided to trust him? I decided to trust myself, Esperanza corrected. To trust that I can tell if he's lying to us. And to trust that your papa would want us to survive no matter what it takes. They walked to the well just as the sun was coming up over the mountains. The desert air was still cool, but Esperanza could already feel it starting to warm up. It was going to be another hot day. Right on time, they saw a rider coming down from the hills. Nalnish rode up to them and dismounted, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, walking on foot, were 3 other people. A woman and 2 small children. I bring my family, Nalnish explained, so you can see why I make this request. The woman looked to be about Esperanza's age, but life had been harder on her. She was thin. Too thin, and her clothes were patched and worn. The children, a boy and a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, stayed close to their mother. They looked at Esperanza and Miguel with wide, curious eyes. This is my wife, Desba, Nalnish said, and my children, Ashki and Atsa. Desba nodded politely but didn't speak. The children peeked out from behind her skirt. They are hungry, Nalnish said simply. Always hungry. Government gives us flour sometimes, but it is not enough. And water on reservation. It is not good. Makes people sick. Esperanza looked at the Apache family and felt something twist in her chest. These weren't the terrifying savages she'd heard stories about. They were just people. A mother and father trying to keep their children alive just like she was. Your children, she said to Nalnish. How old are they? Ashki is 6 summers. Atsa is 7. the same age as Miguel had been when they first came to this valley. Esperanza remembered how excited he'd been about their new life, how he'd helped Carlos build the fence and plant their first crops. Now here were other children the same age who had never known that kind of security. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Nalnish sat down on the ground again and his family joined him. It was less threatening this way, all of them at the same level. "I teach your boy Apache ways," he said. "How to move without sound. How to find food and water in desert. How to read signs of danger. How to fight when fighting is only choice. These skills, they will keep him alive when other men die. And in return, when my family needs water, we come here. Not often, maybe 4 or 5 times during dry season. We take only what we need and," he hesitated, "sometimes when hunting is bad on reservation, maybe we can share what your boy catches." "Share what he catches?" Esperanza frowned. "You mean if Miguel learns to hunt successfully, you want some of the meat?" "Only when we have nothing," Nalnish said quickly. "Only when children cry from hunger. And in return we bring things you need. Medicine plants, information about where soldiers are moving, warning if other raiders are coming." Esperanza was quiet for a long moment, thinking it through. It wasn't just about Miguel learning survival skills. Nalnish was proposing something like a partnership. A way for both families to help each other survive in this harsh country. "How do I know you won't just take everything once Miguel learns what you want to teach him?" she asked. "Because," Nalnish said, "if I wanted to take everything, I would have done it already. I have 20 warriors in my band. You have 1 old rifle and 2 bullets. If I wanted your land, your water, your life, you would already be dead." It was a blunt answer, but an honest one. And it made sense. "Besides," he continued, "if I break promise, your boy will know all my secrets. He will know how Apache think, how we move, how we attack. He could warn soldiers, lead them to our camps. Trust must work both ways." Miguel had been listening to everything without speaking, but now he tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mama, can I ask him something?" Esperanza nodded. Miguel looked directly at Nalnish. "Why did you kill my papa?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Nalnish met the boy's eyes and didn't look away. "Because my children were starving," he said. "Because government promises food but gives little. Because white men and Mexican men take land where we used to hunt. Because if I do not feed my family, they die." "But Papa never took your land," Miguel said. "He just wanted to grow corn and raise cattle." "You are right," Nalnish said. "Your papa was not bad man, but he was in place where we needed to take food and animals. Sometimes good people suffer for what other people do." It wasn't a satisfying answer, and Esperanza could see that Miguel was struggling with it. But it was an honest answer, and somehow that honesty made her trust Nalnish a little more. "If I agree to this," she said, "how do I know your people won't raid us again?" "Because you will not be strangers anymore," Nalnish said. "You will be, how do you say it when friends? Apache do not raid friends." "Friends?" Esperanza almost laughed. "You think we can be friends?" "I think we can help each other live," Nalnish said. "In this land, sometimes that is same thing as friendship." Esperanza looked at her son, then at the Apache family sitting in front of her. The children, Ashki and Atsa, were staring at her with hope in their eyes. They probably didn't understand all the words being spoken, but they understood enough to know their next meal might depend on her answer. "Your son must learn to fight," Nalnish said quietly. "My children must be fed. This is truth we both know. Question is, do we help each other or do we let this hard land kill us all?" Esperanza closed her eyes and thought of Carlos. What would he want her to do? Keep Miguel safe at any cost? Or teach him to be strong enough to survive whatever came next? When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. "We'll try it," she said. "But if you betray us, if you hurt my son, I swear I'll find a way to make you pay for it." Nalnish nodded solemnly. "If I betray you, I will deserve whatever punishment you give me." He stood up and extended his hand toward Miguel. "Come, boy. Your lessons begin now." Miguel looked at Nalnish's outstretched hand for a long moment before taking it. His small hand disappeared in the Apache warrior's calloused grip, but Nalnish was gentle with him. "First lesson," Nalnish said, releasing Miguel's hand. "Never shake hands with someone unless you are ready to trust them with your life. In Apache way, when 2 people touch hands in agreement, it means sacred promise. You understand?" Miguel nodded, though Esperanza could see he was nervous. Her son had always been brave for his age, but this was different. This was the man who had killed his father, and now he was supposed to learn from him. "Good," Nalnish said. "Second lesson. Look at my family. Look at your mother. What do you see? Miguel glanced around uncertainly. I see people. Look closer. Look with eyes that want to stay alive. Miguel studied everyone more carefully. After a moment, his face lit up. Your wife keeps looking toward those rocks over there. And Mama's hand is close to where she keeps the knife in her belt. Very good, Nalnish smiled. You see that both women are still watching for danger, even though we sit and talk like friends. This is smart. In this country, people who stop watching for danger do not live long. Esperanza was surprised. She hadn't realized she was doing it, but her hand was indeed near her knife. And the Apache woman, Desba, was keeping an eye on the surrounding hills. Now, Nalnish continued, tell me what you know about tracking. Papa taught me a little, Miguel said. How to follow deer tracks to water, how to tell which way cattle went. Show me. For the next hour, Nalnish had Miguel examine the ground around their homestead. It was amazing what the boy found once he started really looking. Coyote tracks near the chicken coop where their stolen birds used to live. The footprints of the Apache horses from the raid. Even mouse trails leading to a small burrow under the house. Good eyes, Nalnish said approvingly, but you missed something important. He led Miguel to a spot about 50 yards from the house and pointed to the ground. What you see here? Miguel stared for a long time. I don't see anything. Exactly. Ground here is swept clean. Why you think that is? Miguel looked puzzled, so Nalnish explained. Apache warriors, when we leave camp, we brush away our tracks. Make it look like no one was ever there. But to do this, ground must be disturbed first, then smoothed. See how dirt here is different color than around it? Now that he pointed it out, Miguel could see it. The soil in that area had a slightly different texture, as if it had been stirred up and then carefully flattened. This means what? Nalnish asked. That someone was hiding here? Yes, someone was watching your house for a long time before we attacked. Learning your habits. Seeing when your father went to check animals, when he slept, when he was most vulnerable. Esperanza felt a chill run down her spine. She'd known the attack was planned, but the idea that they'd been watched for days or weeks made it even more frightening. Why are you telling us this? She asked. Because, Nalnish said, if Miguel learns to see these signs, he can warn you when danger is coming. Apache are not only ones who watch before attacking. Mexican bandits do same thing. American soldiers. Even wolves and mountain lions study their prey before they strike. He turned back to Miguel. Your father was a good man, but he did not know these things. He thought his rifle and his courage would be enough. They were not. It was a harsh truth, but Miguel seemed to understand it. What else should I learn? Many things. How to move without making sound. How to find water when your well runs dry. How to hide so well that enemy walks right past you. How to fight with knife, with bow, with bare hands if necessary. Will you teach me to use a bow? In time, but first you must learn to think like Apache. To see world the way we see it. Everything is either friend, enemy, or food. Everything is either safe place, dangerous place, or trap. You understand? Miguel nodded eagerly. Despite everything that had happened, he was clearly excited about learning these new skills. Boys his age always dreamed of being warriors and hunters. He probably never imagined he'd get lessons from a real Apache fighter. While Nalnish worked with Miguel, Esperanza found herself talking to Desba. The Apache woman's Spanish was even more limited than her husband's, but they managed to communicate with a mixture of words and gestures. Your children, Esperanza said, pointing to Ashki and Atsa. They are hungry? Desba nodded sadly. Always hungry. Government food, no good. Make sick sometimes. What do they usually eat? Roots, cactus fruit, small animals when men can catch. But not enough, never enough. Esperanza looked at the two Apache children who were watching their father teach Miguel with wide eyes. They were so thin she could see their ribs through their worn clothing. Without thinking, she went into her house and came back with some of their precious cornmeal. For them, she said, offering it to Desba. The Apache woman's eyes filled with tears. You sure? Is your food too? There's enough, Esperanza lied. The truth was they were running low themselves. But she couldn't bear to see children that hungry. Desba accepted the cornmeal gratefully and immediately began mixing it with water from the well to make a thin porridge for her children. They ate it like it was the best thing they'd ever tasted, which broke Esperanza's heart even more. As the morning progressed, she found herself watching Nalnish teach Miguel with growing amazement. The Apache warrior was incredibly patient with her son, explaining things clearly and making sure Miguel understood before moving on to the next lesson. "See this plant?" Nalnish said, pointing to what looked like a worthless weed. "In Apache, we call it ghost plant. White men think it is nothing, but we know it can save your life." He showed Miguel how to prepare the roots to treat stomach sickness, and how the leaves could be chewed to help with headaches. Then he pointed out another plant that looked almost identical. "This one will kill you if you eat it," he warned. "Difference is small but important. See how leaves on poison plant have tiny hairs? Safe plant has smooth leaves." It was knowledge that could literally mean the difference between life and death in the desert, and Nalnish was sharing it freely with the son of a man he'd killed just a few days ago. "Why?" Esperanza asked him during a break. "Why are you really doing this?" Nalnish was sitting in the shade, watching his own children play with some stones while Miguel practiced identifying different animal tracks. "You think I lie about reason?" he asked. "I think there's more to it than just water and food." Nalnish was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. "My father was great warrior," he said. "Fought Mexican army, American army, anyone who tried to take our land. He taught me everything I know about fighting, about surviving, about being Apache." "What happened to him?" "Killed by soldiers when I was your boy's age. Shot down like dog while trying to protect our village." Nalnish's jaw tightened with old pain. "After that, my mother had to raise me alone. Was very hard for her. Very dangerous. And you see the same thing happening to me and Miguel." "Yes. Woman alone with young son. This is difficult in any time, any place. But here, in this land, it is almost impossible." He gestured toward Miguel, who was now trying to walk silently across a patch of dried leaves. "Your boy is smart. Quick learner. But he knows nothing about real danger. First time bandits come, or soldiers, or hungry Apache from different band, he will try to fight like his father did. And he will die like his father did, unless you teach him, unless someone teaches him. Could be Mexican vaquero, could be American mountain man. But they do not know Apache ways, and Apache ways are best for staying alive in this country." Esperanza watched Miguel trip over a stick and land hard on the ground. Nalnish helped him up and showed him how to lift his feet higher, how to test each step before putting his full weight down. "There is something else," Nalnish said quietly. "Something I do not tell you before." "What?" "Government is planning to move all Apache to new reservation. Smaller place, farther from white settlements. They say we cause too much trouble here." Esperanza felt her stomach drop. "When? Soon, maybe a few months, maybe less. When they do this, many Apache will resist. Will leave reservation and go back to old ways. Raiding, fighting, hiding in mountains. And that affects us how? Because when that happens, all Apache will be seen as enemies. Soldiers will hunt any Indian they find, even peaceful ones. And people like your family living alone in remote places? You will be targets for both sides. Apache who need supplies and soldiers who think you help Apache." The full horror of their situation was starting to sink in. They weren't just dealing with the aftermath of one raid. They were caught in the middle of a much larger conflict that was about to get much worse. "So you're not just teaching Miguel to survive," Esperanza said. "You're teaching him to survive what's coming." "Yes, and maybe if he learns well enough, he can teach others. Help people understand that not all Apache are same. That some of us want peace, want to find a way to live without more killing." Miguel ran up to them, grinning with pride. "I did it. I walked all the way to the fence without making a sound." Nalnish smiled back. "Good. Tomorrow we practice in rocks where footing is harder. And I will teach you about plants that can heal wounds." As the Apache family prepared to leave for the day, Nalnish pulled Esperanza aside. 3 weeks into the lessons, Miguel was becoming a different boy. He moved more quietly now, always watching his surroundings. He could identify dozens of plants and their uses. Most importantly, he was learning to think like someone who expected danger around every corner. Esperanza watched these changes with mixed feelings. She was proud of how quickly Miguel was learning, but it hurt her heart to see her 12-year-old son lose his innocence so fast. Children shouldn't have to know which plants could stop bleeding from knife wounds, or how to tell if someone had been watching their house. But she couldn't argue with the results. Just yesterday, Miguel had spotted horse tracks near their property that she would have missed completely. The tracks were old and probably harmless, but the fact that he noticed them meant he was developing the awareness that might save their lives someday. Nalnish came every few days, always at different times and from different directions. Sometimes he brought his family, sometimes he came alone. He was teaching Miguel that unpredictability was a form of protection. If you did the same thing at the same time every day, your enemies could plan around your habits. Today was different, though. Today, Nalnish arrived with another Apache man, someone Esperanza had never seen before. "This is my brother Hastin," Nalnish explained. "He wants to see the boy who learns Apache ways." Hastin was older than Nalnish, with gray streaks in his long hair and deep lines around his eyes. He looked at Miguel with intense curiosity, then said something in Apache to his brother. "He asks if you are sure this Mexican boy can be trusted with our secrets," Nalnish translated. "What did you tell him?" Esperanza asked nervously. "I told him that trust must be earned by all people, Apache and Mexican alike. Today we will see how much your son has learned." What followed was the most intense day of Miguel's training yet. Hastin put him through test after test, checking his knowledge and skills. Could he find water by reading the landscape? Could he move silently over different types of ground? Could he identify dangerous plants from safe ones? Miguel passed most of the tests, but he struggled with others. When Hastin asked him to track a rabbit through rocky terrain, Miguel lost the trail completely. When they tested his ability to hide, Hastin found him within minutes. "He learns fast," Hastin said in halting Spanish, "but he thinks like white man still." "Too much noise in his head, what does that mean?" Miguel asked, looking frustrated. Nalnish sat down with him under the shade of a mesquite tree. "It means you try too hard to remember everything I teach you, instead of letting your body learn naturally. Apache children, they do not think about being quiet. They just are quiet. They do not think about tracking, they just follow. But how do I stop thinking about it? Practice and time. And maybe, different kind of lesson?" Nalnish looked at Esperanza. "I want to take Miguel away from here for 3 days. Into the mountains. Show him how Apache live when we are away from white man's world." Esperanza's heart jumped into her throat. "Absolutely not. I'm not letting you take my son anywhere." "Mama," Miguel said. "Maybe I should—" "No," she said firmly. "We had an agreement. You teach him here on our land. I'm not sending him off into the wilderness with people I barely know." Hastin said something sharp in Apache. Nalnish nodded and replied, then turned back to Esperanza. "My brother says you are too protective. Says this is why boy still thinks like Mexican instead of like Apache." "I don't care what your brother says," Esperanza snapped. "Miguel is my son, and I decide what's best for him." "And what is best?" Nalnish asked calmly. "Keeping him safe now or making him strong enough to survive what is coming?" It was the same argument they'd had before, but now it felt more urgent. In the past few weeks, they'd heard disturbing news from travelers passing through. Apache raids were increasing all along the frontier. The army was cracking down harder on tribal lands. Tensions were building toward something that felt like war. 3 days, Miguel said quietly. "It's not that long, Mama. It's long enough for something terrible to happen to you." "Something terrible might happen to me here too," Miguel pointed out. "At least this way I'll be learning how to handle it." Esperanza looked at her son and saw that he was growing up faster than she wanted to admit. The scared little boy who had hidden in the root cellar during the raid was gone. In his place was someone who was starting to think like a young warrior. "Where would you take him?" she asked Nalnish reluctantly. "To place where my people have hidden camp, high in mountains near Sacred Spring, safe place where he can learn without distractions." "And you promise to bring him back?" "I promise. And if I break this promise, you will know where to find us. You can bring soldiers, bring Mexican army if you want. We will not hide from justice if we betray your trust." It was a strange comfort, but a real one. Nalnish was giving her specific information about his people's location, which was incredibly dangerous for him. If she betrayed that information to the authorities, his entire band could be wiped out. "I'll think about it," she said finally. That night, as she and Miguel sat by candlelight eating their simple dinner, he brought up the subject again. "Mama, I think I should go with them." "Miguel, listen to me, please. I've learned a lot in the past few weeks, but I know it's not enough. Today, when Hastin was testing me, I could see him thinking I was just another soft Mexican boy who would never be a real warrior." "You don't need to be a warrior," Esperanza said. "You just need to survive." "But what if surviving means fighting someday? What if men come here and try to hurt us and I'm not strong enough to protect you? The question hit Esperanza like a physical blow. Miguel was 12 years old and he was already thinking about protecting her. When had he started carrying that kind of burden? Your papa never wanted you to have to worry about things like that, she said softly. Papa never thought he would die so young either, Miguel replied. But he did. And now it's just us, and I'm the man of the family whether I'm ready or not. Esperanza stared at her son in the flickering candlelight. When had he gotten so wise? When had he started talking like an adult instead of a child? 3 days, she said finally. But I want your word that you'll be careful. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you tell Nalnish you want to come home immediately. Miguel's face lit up. Really? You'll let me go? I'll let you go. But Miguel... Promise me something else. What? Promise me you won't forget who you are. You're learning Apache ways, but you're still my son. You're still Carlos's son. Don't let them change the good parts of who you are. I promise, Mama. 2 days later, Nalnish arrived with 2 horses and supplies for the journey. Miguel had been practically vibrating with excitement since Esperanza gave her permission, checking and rechecking the small pack of belongings he was allowed to bring. Take care of him, Esperanza said to Nalnish as Miguel mounted one of the horses. I will guard him like he is my own son, Nalnish promised, and when he returns you will see difference in him. He will be stronger, more confident, more able to protect you both. Hastin had come along as well, and he nodded approvingly as Miguel settled into the saddle. Boy sits horse like Apache already, he said. This is good sign. As they prepared to leave, Nalnish pulled Esperanza aside for a private word. While we are gone, you should not stay here alone, he said. Go to your nearest neighbors. Stay with them until we return. Why? Is there some kind of danger? There is always danger. But my brother has heard talk. Mexican soldiers are looking for Apache camps. They might search places where they think we get water and supplies. If they find you here alone, they will ask questions you cannot answer safely. Esperanza felt a chill. What kind of questions? About whether you have seen Apache, about whether you have helped Apache, about whether you are loyal to Mexico or sympathetic to Indians. And if I give the wrong answers, then they might decide you are a problem that needs to be solved. The implication was clear. Mexican soldiers weren't known for their gentle treatment of suspected Indian sympathizers. I'll go to the Morales family, Esperanza decided. They live about 20 miles south. I can tell them I need help with repairs on the house. Good. And when Miguel returns, he will know how to spot soldiers coming from long distance, how to hide evidence of Apache visits, how to lie convincingly when necessary. You're going to teach my son to lie? I am going to teach your son to survive, Nalnish corrected. Sometimes truth gets good people killed. With that sobering thought, Esperanza watched her son ride away into the mountains with 2 Apache warriors. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder even than burying Carlos. But as she packed her own belongings for the trip to the Morales place, she tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Miguel was growing up in a world where the old rules didn't apply anymore. Maybe learning to think like Apache was exactly what he needed to survive in that world. She just prayed he would still be her son when he came back. Esperanza was helping Maria Morales prepare tortillas when they heard the horses approaching. Through the small window of the adobe house, she could see a dust cloud rising from the south, too big to be just 1 or 2 riders. Soldiers, Maria whispered, her face going pale. Mexican cavalry. Esperanza's heart started pounding. In the 3 days since Miguel had left with Nalnish, she'd been trying not to worry about him. Now she had a different problem to worry about, herself. What do we do? She asked. We act normal, Maria said firmly. You're here helping me because your husband died and you need support from neighbors. That's all. Nothing about Apache, nothing about any arrangements you might have made. The soldiers rode up to the Morales homestead in a tight formation. There were 8 of them, led by a young officer who looked like he took his job very seriously. They dismounted and the officer approached the house. Good morning, señoras, he said politely, removing his hat. I am Lieutenant Rodriguez. We are searching the area for signs of Apache activity. Apache? Maria sounded genuinely surprised. We haven't seen any Apache around here, Lieutenant. None at all? You are certain? Quite certain. This area has been peaceful for months. The officer's eyes shifted to Esperanza. And you are? Esperanza Martinez. My husband and I had a small homestead near the Gila River. Had? My husband was killed in an Apache raid 2 weeks ago, she said, keeping her voice steady. I came here because I couldn't stay alone on our land. I see. And where is this homestead exactly? Esperanza described the location, watching the officer's face carefully. Did he already know about her place? Was this a test? That's quite isolated, the officer said. Have you seen any Apache since the raid? Any signs they might be returning to the area? No, sir. After what happened to Carlos, I don't plan to go back there alone. It wasn't exactly a lie. She didn't plan to go back alone. She planned to go back with Miguel, who would now know how to spot danger before it arrived. Very wise, the officer said. We have reports that Apache bands are using remote homesteads for water and supplies, intimidating families into helping them. That's terrible, Maria said. You mean they force people to help them? Sometimes. Other times foolish people help them willingly, thinking they can make deals with savages. The way he said foolish people made Esperanza's stomach clench. Did he suspect something? Was he watching her reaction? What happens to people like that? She asked, trying to sound like she was just making conversation. They are treated as collaborators, the officer said coldly. Enemies of Mexico. The punishment for helping Apache is severe. One of the other soldiers rode up to the officer and said something quietly in his ear. The officer nodded and turned back to the women. We need to search your property, he announced. Standard procedure. Of course, Maria said. Please look wherever you need to. For the next hour, Esperanza watched nervously as the soldiers searched every building, every storage area, every place where evidence of Apache presence might be hidden. They were thorough and professional, but they found nothing suspicious. Why would they? The Morales family had nothing to hide, but as they prepared to leave, the officer had one more question for Esperanza. Senora Martinez, we plan to visit your homestead as part of our patrol, to look for signs of continued Apache activity. You wouldn't object to this, would you? Of course not, Esperanza said. Though I should warn you, the place is in poor condition after the raid. They destroyed most everything. We understand. We'll be careful not to disturb your husband's grave. After the soldiers left, Esperanza sat down heavily at Maria's kitchen table. Her hands were shaking. That was close, Maria said. Too close. What aren't you telling me, Esperanza? Esperanza looked at her neighbor, a woman who had been nothing but kind to her, and made a decision. She told Maria everything. About Nalnish's offer, about Miguel's training, about the arrangement they'd made. Maria listened without interrupting, her expression growing more worried with each detail. Dios mío, she whispered when Esperanza finished. Do you realize what you've done? If those soldiers find any evidence of Apache at your place, I know. But Maria, what choice did I have? Stay there alone with Miguel and wait for the next raid? Try to make it to town with nothing but the clothes on our backs? You could have come here. Juan and I would have taken you in. For how long? Forever? Miguel and I would be charity cases, dependent on your kindness for the rest of our lives. Maria was quiet for a moment, thinking it through. What you're doing, it's incredibly dangerous. But I suppose I understand why you felt you had to try it. The question now is, what do I do about those soldiers? They're going to search my homestead and Miguel isn't back yet. What if they find evidence of Apache visits? When is Miguel supposed to return? Today or tomorrow? But what if he's late? What if something happened to him? Maria reached across the table and squeezed Esperanza's hand. You can't think like that. You have to believe he'll come back safely. And if he doesn't, then Juan and I will help you figure out what to do next. But right now you need to get back to your homestead before those soldiers arrive. If you're not there when they come, they'll be suspicious. Esperanza knew Maria was right. As much as she wanted to stay in the safety of her neighbor's home, she had to face whatever was coming. She gathered her few belongings and prepared to ride back to the place where this whole complicated arrangement had begun. The journey back to her homestead felt like the longest 20 miles of her life. Every rock formation could be hiding soldiers. Every dust cloud could be Apache returning with Miguel, or without him. When she finally reached her property, everything looked exactly as she'd left it. The house was still standing, though it bore the scars of the raid. Carlos's grave was undisturbed. The well was working fine. But as she looked around with eyes that Miguel had trained to see details, she spotted things that worried her. Marks in the dirt near the well where Apache horses had stood, a place where someone had built a small, nearly invisible fire. Footprints that definitely weren't hers or Miguel's. If she could see these signs, trained soldiers would definitely notice them. Working frantically, Esperanza tried to erase any evidence of Apache presence. She swept the dirt around the well, scattered the cold ashes from the fire, and smoothed out the most obvious footprints. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. As the sun started to set, she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses coming fast. Her heart jumped. Were the soldiers coming already? But as the riders got closer, she realized they were coming from the wrong direction. From the north, where the mountains were, 3 riders emerged from the desert twilight. Nalnish, Hastin, and Miguel Esperanza ran toward them, relief flooding through her like cool water. Miguel looked tired and dusty, but he was grinning from ear to ear. "Mama," he called out, sliding down from his horse. "You should see what I learned." "Miguel, thank God you're safe. But listen, we have a problem. Mexican soldiers were at the Morales place today. They're planning to search our homestead. They could be here any time." Nalnish's expression immediately became serious. "What kind of soldiers?"
How many?
8 cavalry soldiers led by a young lieutenant. They're looking for signs of Apache activity. Did you tell them anything? Nothing. But they suspect people are helping Apache in this area, and I tried to clean up signs of your visits, but I don't know if I got everything. Hastings said something sharp in Apache. Nalnish nodded and turned to Miguel. "Boy, this is your first real test. Show your mother what you learned in mountains." To Esperanza's amazement, Miguel immediately started moving around their property with purpose and confidence. He found signs she'd missed. A scrap of Apache horsehair caught on a bush, marks where someone had sharpened a knife on a rock, even the faint outline of a moccasin print in hard-packed dirt. "There," he said, pointing to various spots. "And there. And over there by the fence." Working together, they eliminated every trace of Apache presence in less than 30 minutes. Miguel knew exactly what to look for and how to erase it. When they were finished, the homestead looked like no one but Esperanza and Miguel had been there in weeks. "Very good," Nalnish said approvingly. "You think like Apache now. What else should we do?" Miguel asked. "Now you must think like Mexican boy again," Nalnish said. "When soldiers come, you are just mother and son trying to rebuild after tragedy. You know nothing about Apache except that they killed your father and stole your animals. You are afraid of them and want soldiers to protect you." "I can do that," Miguel said confidently. Nalnish and Hastin prepared to leave. But before they went, Nalnish had one more piece of advice. If soldiers ask direct questions about helping Apache, tell them you would never risk your son's life by doing such thing. This is truth they will believe because all parents feel this way. "Thank you," Esperanza said, "for bringing Miguel back safely and for teaching him so well. He is a good student, and now he is ready for anything that comes." The Apache warriors melted back into the desert just as quietly as they'd appeared. Within minutes, it was as if they'd never been there at all. That night, as Esperanza and Miguel sat by candlelight, she asked him about his 3 days in the mountains. The soldiers' search had gone exactly as Esperanza hoped. They found nothing suspicious, accepted her story about being a grieving widow, and left with polite promises to patrol the area regularly for her protection. Miguel had played his part perfectly, acting like a scared boy who just wanted the Apache to stay far away. But that had been 2 months ago. Now, as Esperanza stared at the bottom of their well, she faced a crisis that no amount of Apache training could solve. There was no water. The drought had started gradually. First, the spring rains failed to come. Then the summer heat arrived early and stayed longer than usual. Streams that had run for decades dried up to nothing. Even the Rio Grande was running lower than anyone could remember. Their well had always been reliable, fed by an underground spring that seemed endless. Carlos used to joke that they'd chosen the one piece of land in the territory that would never run dry. Now, as Esperanza lowered the bucket again and again, all she pulled up was mud and rocks. "How much water do we have left?" Miguel asked, looking at the few containers they'd filled from the muddy dregs. "Maybe enough for 3 days if we're very careful," Esperanza said. 4 days if we're lucky. What about the other homesteads? The Morales family? I rode over there yesterday. Their well is dry too. They're talking about loading up their wagon and heading for the river. But that's a 2-day journey each way, and who knows if there's even water there anymore. Miguel was quiet for a moment, thinking. In the past 2 months, he'd grown taller and stronger. The training with Nalnish had changed him in ways that went beyond just survival skills. He thought more carefully before speaking now, considered problems from multiple angles like an adult. "Mama," he said finally, "what about the sacred spring Nalnish mentioned? The one where they took me in the mountains? What about it? It had plenty of water. Clear cold water that tasted better than anything I'd ever had. And Nalnish said it never runs dry, even in the worst droughts. Esperanza felt her heart sink. Miguel, we can't just go to an Apache sacred site and take their water. Even if we knew how to find it. But what if we asked? What if we sent word to Nalnish and explained our situation? How would we even contact him? We have no idea where he is right now. Actually, Miguel said slowly, I think I do know how to find him. What do you mean? He taught me about signal fires, how Apache communicate across long distances using smoke. There's a specific pattern that means friend needs help. If I could get to high ground and build the right kind of fire. Esperanza stared at her son. You're serious, dead serious. Mama, we're going to die of thirst if we don't do something. The nearest town is 4 days away and we don't have enough water to make that journey. Our neighbors are in the same situation we are. Nobody around here has water to spare. He was right and she knew it. They'd already cut their water consumption to dangerous levels. Another few days without rain, and they'd be facing a choice between dying of thirst at home or dying of thirst on the road to somewhere else. Even if Nalnish got the signal, she said, how do we know he'd help us? Maybe the drought is affecting his people too. Maybe they can't spare water for anyone. Then we'll die knowing we tried everything, Miguel said simply. But I don't think he'll abandon us. Not after everything we've been through together. That afternoon, Miguel climbed to the highest hill on their property carrying materials for a signal fire. Esperanza watched from below as he carefully arranged the wood and kindling exactly as Nalnish had taught him. Then he lit it and began adding green brush at specific intervals, creating the pattern of smoke signals that meant urgent help needed. For 3 hours, he maintained the fire, sending the same message over and over into the desert sky. When the sun started to set, he finally came down. Now we wait, he said. They didn't have to wait long. Just after midnight, Esperanza woke to the sound of horses outside. Not many horses, maybe 2 or 3. She grabbed the rifle and peered through the window, but in the darkness she couldn't see much. Who's there? She called out. Friends, came Nalnish's familiar voice. Friends who received your signal. Esperanza opened the door to find not just Nalnish, but his entire family. Tezba, Ashki, and Atsa were all there, along with an elderly Apache woman she didn't recognize. You came, Miguel said, running out to greet them. I wasn't sure the signal would work. Signal worked perfectly, Nalnish said. But we were already coming this direction. Drought affects everyone, Mexican and Apache alike. In the lamplight, Esperanza could see that the Apache family looked even thinner than before. The children's eyes seemed huge in their gaunt faces, and Desba appeared weak with exhaustion. Your people are suffering too, Esperanza said. Very much, Nalnish confirmed. Reservation wells are dry. Government promises water, but promises do not fill empty stomachs or ease thirst. Many families have left trying to find water in old places. And you? We came here because this is only place we know where people might help us instead of shooting us on sight. The elderly woman said something in Apache. Nalnish nodded and turned to Esperanza. This is my grandmother, Shinasha. She is wise in the old ways. She says the drought will get worse before it gets better, and only those who work together will survive it. What does she mean? She means, Nalnish said, that maybe it is time to stop pretending we are just teacher and student. Maybe time to admit we have become something more. Like what? Like family. The word hung in the air between them. Family. It seemed impossible considering everything that had happened. Yet as Esperanza looked at the Apache children, so desperately thin and thirsty, she felt the same protective instinct she felt for Miguel. Our well is dry too, she admitted. We have maybe 3 days of water left. We know, Nalnish said. Shinasha can smell dry wells from miles away, but she also knows where to find water when all else fails. The old woman spoke again, her voice crackling but authoritative. She says there is water beneath this land, Nalnish translated. Deeper than your well reaches. Water that has been there since the beginning of time. But to reach it, we must dig where the spirits guide us. You mean dowsing? Water witching? Something like that. But Apache way, not white man's way. Esperanza looked at Miguel, who was nodding eagerly. She looked at the Apache family, who were staring at her with desperate hope. Then she looked at her own supplies, the last few containers of muddy water that stood between them and death. What would we need to do? Shinasha spoke directly to Esperanza for the first time. her ancient eyes bright with intelligence. Nalnish translated, she says first we must all stay together, one family sharing water equally until we find more. Second, we must dig where she tells us to dig, even if it makes no sense to us. Third, we must trust each other completely, because if anyone betrays the group, we all die. Stay together? You mean all of us here? Yes, Apache and Mexican families living as one until drought passes. Esperanza felt dizzy. What Nalnish was proposing was beyond dangerous. If Mexican soldiers found Apache families living on her property, everyone would be shot as traitors. If Apache warriors discovered Nalnish was protecting Mexicans, he and his family might be cast out or worse. But as she looked around at all the faces watching her, Miguel, Nalnish, Desba, the children, the wise grandmother, she realized they were already past the point of no return. They were all in this together now, whether she admitted it or not. How long do you think the drought will last? She asked. Shinasha said something and Nalnish's face grew grave. She says maybe many months, maybe a year. This is not ordinary dry spell. This is the kind of drought that changes everything. Kills the weak, tests the strong. And you think we can survive it together? Apart we all die, Nalnish said simply. Together maybe we have chance. Esperanza closed her eyes and thought of Carlos. What would he want her to do? Protect Miguel at any cost? Or do whatever it took to ensure he grew up in a world where different people could help each other, instead of killing each other? When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. All right, she said. We'll try it. But if this gets us all killed, I'm blaming you. For the first time in weeks, Nalnish smiled. If this gets us all killed, you can blame me in whatever spirit world we end up in. And so began the strangest household in the entire Southwest. A Mexican widow, her son, an Apache warrior, his family, and a grandmother who claimed she could find water where none existed. The next morning they would find out if she was right. 5 years later, Miguel Martinez stood in the courthouse in Santa Fe, serving as translator between a group of Apache elders and a territorial judge. At 17, he was one of the few people in New Mexico who could speak fluent Apache, Spanish, and English. More importantly, he was one of the even fewer people that both sides trusted. The Apache leaders say they want to negotiate grazing rights for their cattle, Miguel explained to the judge. They're not asking for their old hunting grounds back. They just want permission to use certain areas during drought seasons, when the reservation land can't support their animals. Judge Patterson nodded thoughtfully. And they're willing to pay fees for this privilege? Miguel turned to the Apache elders and spoke in their language. After a brief discussion, he turned back to the judge. They say money is not the right payment. They offer something more valuable. Their knowledge of which areas have water during dry years, and their promise to help fight fires and track criminals who hide in the mountains. It was exactly the kind of creative solution that Miguel had become known for. Instead of thinking in terms of winner and loser, he looked for ways that both sides could benefit from cooperation. The drought that had brought his family and Nalnish's family together had lasted 8 months. During that time, they'd lived as one household, sharing everything: food, water, work, and danger. Shinasha had indeed found water by leading them to dig in a spot that seemed completely random. 15 feet down, they'd hit a spring that provided enough water for everyone. But water was just the beginning of what they'd shared. Esperanza had learned to prepare traditional Apache foods that could sustain people through hard times. Desba had learned to grow Mexican crops that could thrive in poor soil. The children had grown up speaking both languages and understanding both cultures. Most importantly, they'd learned to hide their unusual arrangement from the outside world. When Mexican soldiers patrolled the area, the Apache family would retreat to carefully prepared hiding spots in the nearby hills. When Apache war parties passed through, Esperanza and Miguel would stay inside while Nalnish handled any interactions. It had worked because both families were completely committed to protecting each other. The trust that had started as a desperate bargain had grown into something deeper, genuine affection and loyalty. Now, years later, that strange household had produced something unique in the Southwest. A young man who could bridge the gap between two worlds that seemed destined for eternal conflict. After the court session, Miguel walked with the Apache elders to a small restaurant where they could talk privately. These men had known him since he was a boy, and they spoke to him with the respect usually reserved for their own sons. "You did well today," said Hastian, who was now a respected leader among his people. The judge listened because you know how to speak to white men in ways they understand. And because you helped him see that cooperation benefits everyone, added another elder. Your teacher trained you well, Miguel smiled. Nalnish always said the best warriors are the ones who can win without fighting. Speaking of Nalnish, have you seen him recently? Last month. He's doing well. His family has land near the reservation border now, and he's teaching young Apache men how to work with cattle. The government pays him as a liaison officer. It was hard to believe, but Nalnish had become something like a diplomat. His reputation for honesty and his ability to prevent conflicts had earned him respect from both Apache leaders and territorial officials. He was still a warrior, but now he fought with words instead of weapons. And your mother? She's opened a trading post at our old homestead. Apache families bring crafts and medicinal plants to trade for tools and cloth. Mexican and American settlers stop by for supplies. She says it's the busiest her little corner of the desert has ever been. What Miguel didn't mention was that Esperanza had also become something of a healer. Years of learning about Apache medicine from Shinasha had given her knowledge that few doctors in the territory possessed. People traveled long distances to get her help with illnesses that regular medicine couldn't cure. The arrangement had evolved far beyond what any of them had originally imagined. What started as a desperate trade, water for training, had become a small but thriving community where Apache and Mexican families worked together for mutual benefit. There's something we want to ask you, Hastien said, growing serious. The territorial government is looking for someone to help negotiate a new treaty with our people. Someone who understands both sides and can be trusted by both sides. Miguel felt his heart skip. You mean as an official representative? More than that. They want someone who can help write the treaty, make sure it's fair to everyone. It would mean traveling to Washington, speaking to important government men, representing Apache interests to people who have never met an Apache in their lives. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a huge responsibility. If he succeeded, he might help create lasting peace between Apache and American settlers. If he failed, the consequences could be catastrophic for his people, both his Apache teachers and his Mexican neighbors. What does Nalnish think? He says the choice is yours, but that you were born for this kind of work. That maybe everything that happened, the raid, the drought, your training, maybe it was all preparation for something bigger. That evening, Miguel rode back to his mother's trading post to discuss the offer with her. He found Esperanza settling accounts with a young Apache woman who had brought beautiful pottery to trade for winter supplies. How was court today? Esperanza asked after her customer left. Miguel told her about the successful negotiation, and then about the offer from the Apache elders. Esperanza listened without interrupting, her face growing more thoughtful with each detail. Washington, she said finally. That's a long way from home. Yes, but Mama, think about what this could mean. Real peace between Apache and settlers. An end to the raids and the revenge killings. A chance for people like us to live openly instead of hiding who we help and who we care about. Esperanza was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the desert that had shaped both their lives. Your father would be proud, she said finally. He always wanted you to make something important of your life. And you? What do you want? I want you to be safe and happy. But I also want you to use the gifts you've been given. Not everyone can speak 3 languages and understand 3 different ways of thinking. Maybe that makes it your responsibility to try, even if it means leaving you here alone. Esperanza smiled. Mijo, I'm hardly alone. I have more friends and neighbors now than I ever did when your father was alive. Apache families, Mexican families, even some American settlers who appreciate fair dealing. This trading post has become like a small town. And if something goes wrong, if I fail and make things worse, then you'll come home and we'll figure out what to do next. But Miguel, you're not the same scared boy who hid in the root cellar during that raid. You're not even the same young man who went to the mountains with Nalnish. You've become someone who can handle whatever comes. That night, Miguel sat by the well where this whole strange journey had begun. The same well where Nalnish had first explained why his family needed water. The same well where they'd all nearly died of thirst during the drought. The same well that now provided water for a mixed community that shouldn't have been possible. As he sat there thinking, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see an elderly Apache woman walking toward him in the moonlight. It was Shinasha, Nalnish's grandmother. who still lived with them part of each year. She sat down beside him and spoke in Apache. She says, came Nalnish's voice from the darkness, that water always finds its way around obstacles. It doesn't fight the rocks, it flows around them, over them, through them. Eventually it reaches where it needs to go. Nalnish emerged from the shadows and joined them by the well. I heard about the government's offer, he said. Good news travels fast. What do you really think I should do? I think, Nalnish said, that you are the water, and the hatred between our peoples is the rock. You have spent your whole life learning to flow around that hatred, to find ways through it. Now you have chance to carve a new path for others to follow. And if I fail, then at least you tried. Your father died trying to protect his family. I killed him trying to protect mine. You have chance to protect all our families, Apache and Mexican and American alike. How can you not try? Shinasha spoke again, her voice soft but firm in the desert night. She says, Nalnish translated, that the spirits brought us all together for a reason. The raid that killed your father, the drought that forced us to cooperate, the trust we built, none of it was accident. 'Twas preparation for this moment. Miguel looked at the two people who had shaped his life in ways he never could have imagined. The Apache warrior who had killed his father and then became like a second father to him. The wise woman who had taught him that survival sometimes meant letting go of old hatreds and embracing new possibilities. All right, he said finally. I'll do it. I'll go to Washington and try to build a bridge between worlds. Good, Nalnish said. But remember, you are not going alone. You carry all of us with you. Every lesson you learned, every person you helped,